The Culture Map by Aaron Meyer. Breaking through the invisible boundaries of global business. I'm not going to do a lot of videos about business books here, but this one was pretty interesting to me. I'll just show you. I've got the hardback. Here's the dust jacket. And the idea here is that she takes a series of, well, what she calls maps, but a series of ways of doing things, okay, and compares and contrasts a bunch of different countries, that is really the cultures within those countries, and then lets you and then gives you some advice about dealing with those countries. Yes, it's in a business setting, but you might even notice some of these things outside of a business setting. So the best thing to do is to give an example. So I see that we've got one of these. Okay, so we have, well, you know what, I guess we could talk about time. We have flexible time versus linear time, and this has been talked about in a lot of different ways. Island time, where you're not so worried about being exactly on time. If they say 8 o'clock, you might show up at 8:30, 8:45, doesn't really matter, we'll get there in the end, versus the ones with more direct, they might say, well, it says 8 o'clock, I need to be there at 8 o'clock. What's interesting, and what I think she does a pretty good job of, is help you see the other way of doing things, so that you don't say, well, yeah, my way is right and their way is wrong. So she's got 8, I think it's 8 sort of what you call maps, I guess, that you can sort of look into and say, okay, well, how do people communicate? How do people, are people trying to be very explicit and say everything and make everything very clear, or do people say, oh, well, you know, they could read between the lines, you don't have to say everything? Okay, so I come from the United States originally, where we are considered very high, very low context, which means that we are very explicit. This is just this is a general thing. Of course, in every country, in every culture, you have people across the entire range of ways to be. So we're just talking about what's normal, or rather what's average, or what's considered the typical kind of thing. In the US, of course, there are lots of people who do not like to be explicit. They like to leave things between the lines. They don't want to say everything exactly right. But, sort of we say, well, what's the typical kind of person? So the typical kind of person likes to leave things as low context. That is, it doesn't really matter the context. We're going to spell it all out for you to give you all the bullet points. Whereas if you come down to sort of the higher context, some Japan, China, Thailand, where they would say the things in a way that they expect you to understand what they're saying without having to make it explicit. All right. And then we have direct negative feedback and indirect negative feedback. So we say, okay, well, for example, in the US, although we do like to say, to be very explicit, that doesn't really hold when we are talking about negative feedback. We might want to say, we couch our negative feedback in positive terms. So we might say, 3 or 4 things that we think are really good about something before saying something that we think is bad. Or we might use terms like, well, you could have been a little bit more, blah, 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 instead of just saying, you should have been more blah, blah, blah. You see what I'm saying? We couch it in those kind of terms. Typically, a culture that gives indirect negative feedback. Cultures that give direct feedback might say, you are wrong here, this was absolutely unprofessional, or something like that. And as I was saying, what she does well is let us see the other side. So to me, I would say, well, it's rude to just come out there and say, you were wrong, you shouldn't have done that. We have to be more, more kind and more considerate, and it's wrong to do it that other way. But a Dutch person would look at this and say, this isn't a child that you're talking to, it's an adult. Why do you have to treat them like a child and say, oh, but you're good in this way and good in this way? Just tell them what they're doing wrong so that they know what they're doing wrong, and let's get on with it. And of course, that works when you're in the Netherlands. Everyone understands that. And I say everyone again, I'm talking in generalities, but they understand that. And in the United States, it's understood that you couch things and soften things. So it's when those two cultures work with each other that we have some friction where you have misunderstandings. Gee, that guy's really rude. Or, gee, that guy won't get to the point. He thinks he treats me like a child. Or worse, he thinks that really there's nothing wrong with my work because he told me 5 good things and only 1 bad thing. So really, I'm doing really great. Whereas the American would go, well, he told me 5 good things as a softening thing, but he told me the bad thing as a, that's actually what I need to work on. Okay, that's enough of that. It's pretty good. It's really interesting. I found that the places where she put Americans were spot on for me personally. I know other Americans aren't like that, but they were spot on for me personally. I have had experiences dealing with Indian people, with Japanese people, that matched the kinds of things that she was talking about as the differences between Americans and Japanese people and Indian people. So this hit the nail on the head for me. I found it really interesting, and I've been telling a few other people about it. However, some people that I talked to 1 or 2 Indian people who said, well, no, that doesn't fit what I think is right. So, I don't know. But for me, this seemed to be about right. Okay, it's The Culture Map by Erin Meyer.